Our next guest was with us a few weeks ago on the program, but we were somewhat crunched for time. He was on his way. In fact, he was giving a speech that day at the Optimist Club here in Twin Falls, and he's a well-known motivational speaker, but he's got a fascinating life story, and it's all about overcoming adversity. His name is Pete Coulson, and lives here in Idaho. And he's joining me, Bill Colley, on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I wanted to point out, too, as well, he's got a little bit of time to spend with us this morning, although he is a busy, busy man when it comes to his work. First of all, Pete, welcome back to our program.
Well, welcome. Thanks for inviting me back.
Right off the beginning, you had mentioned when you were here the last time that you had been adopted into a family of 10 kids in Austria when you were not yet 10 years old at the time, right, when that happened?
Correct. I grew up in an orphanage. My brother and I were left at the hospital by our mother because of the circumstances of that time, and then we were placed in an orphanage.
And the circumstances of the time in the early 1950s, and a good part of Europe was still being occupied by Allied troops, and you had a lot of women in Europe who were having relationships with some of these troops from the Allied nations, and they were somewhat shunned for doing that, and so the two of you were placed in an orphanage shortly after being born.
Correct. Yeah, there was a big stigma about anybody that was mixed race was seen as an outcast. And through that process, orphanages were established, and they didn't see the child as an outcast, but an opportunity to impact lives. And that's how I've been blessed.
You apparently then never actually got to know your actual biological parents.
No, I did not. I didn't know her about anything about her until about 2 years ago, where I found out that she had a total of 7 kids, and they were all given up except the last one.
And so you and your brother lived for many, many years in this orphanage, and he ended up actually passing away while he was still young.
Correct. Yes, I lived in the orphanage for 10 years from the time of my birth till 1964. He passed away in 1961. He was what they called a pituitary dwarf. His pituitary gland didn't work, and so he had a lot of health issues, as did I. And God just chose to take him home earlier.
And then you're adopted into a family that must have been a very caring family at that point.
Yes, mom and dad, and even the caretakers at the orphanage were there to empower us to become the best that we could be, despite the opinions of the world.
I've got to think that growing up in that part of the world also was, at least from you made a comment about a rainbow. That I took a picture of a rainbow the other day, and you mentioned about God's blessings. And growing up in Austria, you were surrounded by mountains and just beautiful scenery and the like. It must have been very awe-inspiring.
Yes, and I think that's the one thing. My dad my adopted father worked for the American military at the time, and he saw the beauty of Austria, but then he also was brought to great compassion to deal with the obstacles of Austria. And that's what prompted him to go back to Austria as a missionary and run this orphanage.
Gosh, I got to think that eventually you made your way to the United States, and how did that come about?
Well, what happened as we were getting older, between the youngest and the oldest, there was only 2.5 years. So you can imagine the dynamics of that. And then at that time, as my older siblings were getting closer to going to university or trade school, in Europe, you were limited. If you were a person of color, you could not go to university. You could only go to trade school. And mom and dad felt at the time that this was an opportunity to take us into an environment that would give us better opportunities by moving us to the United States. So they chose to adopt us all. And that process in itself had the hand of God in it, because usually that was a pretty long process. But because Europe and its mindset at that time, they wanted to take us up the social roles of expectations of paying for these outcasts. And so they moved that adoption process through in a rapid fashion.
But did you have a certain goal when you got to the United States, like a life plan? Did you know what you were going to do at that stage?
I did not. I think I lost my dad about 2 months ago. And one of the ways I would define my father, he taught me with tough love and practical guidance. And what I mean by that is that he taught me to be the right person and focus on being the right person and having the right profession. And by focusing on the right person, I would end up in the right profession. And so my goal was just to take those obstacles of life and create opportunities so I could be the best person that I could be.
I was going to say, having spent so many years of your formative years in a German-speaking country, your English is impeccable. So someone was working quite well with you at the time to pick up the language.
Well, that was interesting because we were just thrown into America and we had to learn the language. And for me, I can articulate, but the write was very difficult. So school was a struggle for me. In fact, I had to repeat the third grade because I could not grasp everything. And but yet for me, I didn't see that as a failure. I just saw that as a teacher investing in me so that I could be the best that I could be.
I want to mention to people who might just be tuning in, you're listening to a conversation we're having with Coach Pete Coulson, who made an appearance here in Twin Falls a few weeks ago, and he spoke to the Optimist Club, and his life story really is an inspiration for a great many people, especially a lot of the young people that he's had. He's clearly been blessed to work with them during his lifetime, and he's joining us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. With Bill Colley. We're at 40, and it's 12 minutes after 7 o'clock. Once you're here and you came to a conclusion about picking up, you go off to college and you decide that you're going to become, well, you got involved apparently in the athletic world.
Yes, I went to college with the intent to become a missionary to Brazil. And probably after my first 4 weeks of school, I realized, I have a hard enough time with the English language. And I learned Portuguese, and so that was kind of a challenge. But what I did is I took an aptitude test, and in that aptitude test, I scored high in the mechanical side, and I was in a high percentile and also in the social side. So what I decided is, I'm going to get involved in psychology and athletics. And through the opportunity of work experience, we had to do community service. I got involved with the Boys and Girls Club, with the YMCA, and also with the McLaren, which is an adolescent school for misbehaved children. And I got involved in that process, and I realized very rapidly that my mission field starts in my backyard. In fact, my mission field starts in my dorm room and impacting lives there because there's a lot of people, even in college, couldn't figure me out. They had their opinions about who I was because of my exterior, because I'm a little dark complected. So there are a lot of false assumptions made. But what I learned, a very valuable lesson in college, if I can learn all the theology I want, but if I don't know how to love people as Christ loved me, I'm nothing. And so that's how my passion through sports began.
And I've got to think that over the course of the last few decades, you clearly impacted thousands and thousands of lives. And it's not always by sitting down with someone and having a long discussion. It's just the way you may present yourself on a day-to-day basis. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll take a short break. We'll get back to that in just a moment. I've got to get to a break for the Ag Report, but we'll get into this and about your work with a lot of the younger people today and maybe some solutions you might see for a lot of what we I guess we're clearly calling the current social angst that a lot of young people are struggling with. In the meantime, Ag Report and the weather on the way. It's 42. It's almost 7:15. Our guest is Coach Pete Coulson joining us this morning. And I'm going to say we're looking at a lot of rain today and a lot of rain for the next several days, maybe straight through Memorial Day. Going to be very green when it all comes to an end. And I guess the best way to describe the weather over the next few days, rainy. Rain today. It will taper off a little bit on Thursday and Friday, but then looks like we get back into some very rainy weather, according to some forecasts, throughout the entire Memorial Day weekend. It'll be a little warmer, though. Temperatures will be spiking back up into the 60s over the weekend. We're spending some time this morning with Coach Pete Coulson, and he's a motivational speaker, and he was in Twin Falls just a few weeks ago speaking at the Optimist Club. He does a lot of these engagements. In fact, there's a YouTube video of his appearance here that you could find. Simply do, if you go to YouTube, all you have to do is if you type in his name, and Pete is the common spelling, and Coulson is Coulson, and then you do a search on YouTube, you're likely to come up with that as one of the first videos that you're going to find. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're 20 minutes after 7 o'clock, and it's 42 on Magic Valley this morning. And Coach, quick question: where did you actually go to college? And you mentioned the fact that you were trying to live your faith in the dorm and around campus. Where did that happen to be?
I went to college in Salem, Oregon. It was Western Baptist at the time, and now it's called Corbin University. I graduated there, and I also went to George Fox University.
And then you ended up eventually in Idaho.
Yes. I was in Oregon for about 37 years, and unfortunately, I went through a divorce. And through that process, we got remarried and relocated to Twin Falls, where I served as the PAL Step director, and I was also involved as a coach of the Canyon Ridge High School, their freshman football program. And then I became a student service specialist in the Twin Falls area. And then because my wife's promotion, we had to move back to Boise.
Okay. And you also you've coached, but you've done some refereeing too.
Yes, I've been in the refereeing arena for about 45 years.
I bet you've seen a lot.
And I've done all the levels from K to college.
Now,
in that process, I learned some very valuable lessons.
Sure.
And those lessons came at times when I thought a child was being a disrespectful child. But I quickly learned that a child was trying to figure out life. One example here was, it was probably about my first couple years of refereeing. This kid on the court was just being a little snot. And I was trying to figure, okay, what's going on? And I had the opportunity on a weekly basis to referee these kids. And I intentionally asked his mother to be the scorekeeper. And so I asked his mom, what can I do to help your son? What's going on? And she said, my son just lost his dad. And I quickly learned a very valuable lesson of how I was going to coach, how I was going to ref, how I was going to live life. Person first, player second. Because if I don't understand the person, I will never have a good player. I will never have a good profession, whatever career they choose.
I think that we talk a lot about how stressed our teens and even our younger children are today. And I grew up in the 1960s and 1970s, and I thought that perhaps we dealt with a lot of stress. But then in retrospect, I think I had it pretty. It was pretty easy growing up in a small town with a lot of friends and a lot of extended family. But today we're dealing with, I guess, some cultural changes that they've come along so fast. It's difficult for, I think, the young people especially to keep up with them. When you sit down with somebody who's a troubled 15 or 16-year-old, what do you tell them?
Well, I think the first thing I look at is they have value. They have significance. Who they are, is that the way God designed them to be? And in that process, there's going to be obstacles that come our way. There's going to be disappointment that comes our way. But through those obstacles, through those disappointments, are you going to become a better person or a bitter person? And that is developed, I think, in their lives by getting the right people in their lives. And what I mean by that is finding friends that help you hear what you want to hear, but most importantly, hear what you need to hear. Let me give you an example. My father, as I said, was a man who taught me with tough love and practical guidance. And the best thing he did for me is I mouthed off to him, and he told me, son, We can't have two bosses in your house. In our house, one's got to go, and it's not going to be me. And 3 weeks before I graduated from high school, I was kicked out of the house. Now, a lot of people would think that was rude, that was disrespectful. But my dad knew what I needed to hear. And what I needed to hear was I need to respect authority. And sometimes you have to learn that lesson of authority through the school of hard knocks. And he gave me that opportunity because even though I was unhappy about leaving, in the back of my mind, I knew what Dad expected of me. Because he told me many times, not what I wanted to hear, but what I needed to hear. And what I needed to hear is, Pete, make improvements, not excuses.
When you go through a situation like that, see, you had an intact family, but a lot of young people today obviously don't. We see so many people who are being raised in just a one parent household, and if mom has to work, because it's usually mom, if she has to work, she's not there, and it's easy for the kid to just run with a pack in the neighborhood. You definitely have seen a lot of that.
Yes.
How do you address it?
I think one of the biggest things I try to tell them to help them understand, especially like a young person or maybe struggling with drug addiction and things like that, because there is so much pain in their lives. I try to help them understand the fact that, yes, there's pain, but your actions are a byproduct of not being able to process that pain. And I look at their addictive behavior or their frustrations in life, and I say, okay, the most important I think I need to help you understand is that you have value, that you have significance. And in order for you to understand that, find those people in your life that will mentor you. In our home life, you understand between the youngest and oldest is only 2.5 years. My mom and dad did not have all the time to invest in each of us emotional needs. But I had Sunday school teachers, I had coaches, I had teachers in my life that were willing to be vulnerable. They were willing to be authentic and say, Pete, you're a great young man, but if you don't change this behavior, this is going to be the outcome. And I value those men. I value those coaches in my life that taught me the things I needed to hear. I'll give you a quick example. When I moved here from Austria, I played baseball for the first time, and one of my buddies, as little as I understood English, he told me, I got the ball, and he said, throw the kid out at first base. So I took the ball as hard as I could, and I threw it at the kid, and he was out. But I didn't hit the mid, I hit the kid. What the principal did to me after that act was powerful. He put his arm on my shoulder and says, Pete, out means you throw the ball at the mitt. But that was a very valuable lesson because it taught me how I'm going to coach going forward. Take the time to understand what's going through that person's life. And I feel sports are a good tool, or extracurricular are good tools for kids to learn to respect authority figures outside their home. One of the biggest challenges as a referee is parents are always trying to tell you how to referee. They always want to hand you a new pair of glasses. And I came up with this 4 C's. Let the coach coach, let the player compete, let the ref correct, and let the parent cheer. And I have a side note to that says, okay, parents, park your helicopter before you enter the gym. Because what those kids need to learn is transitional behavior, transitional respect, of learning to respect other people of authority in their lives. And sports and extracurricular activities help those young people in that.
We've got to get to a commercial or a news break in just a moment, but you can stick around, right?
Yes.
Before we do that, we've got about 45 seconds. You have a web presence, as I understand it, and if people would like to take a look at that, where do they go?
Well, there's a video called Our Journey of 10, and that kind of gives my background story. And then there's a other video that's called I know referees use lifesavers more than candy. And that's what kind of elevated this whole motivational speaking for me because I handed out lifesavers to parents when they were misbehaving. I can elaborate that a little bit more later about why I do that.
Sure. Well, we'll take a short break. We've got more coming up with Coach Pete Coulson in just a few minutes. In the meantime, the news is on the way. It's 40. It's coming up on 7:30. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You're listening to Magic Valley this morning. Joining us this morning, Coach Pete Coulson, who has spent the last several decades of his life both coaching and refereeing sports in Oregon and Idaho, and he's spending a few minutes with us this morning talking a little bit about his life and how he has dealt with especially problematic situations involving often our children, as well as he was pointing out just before the news break, some of the parents too. It's 42. We're at 7:34 on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you on Magic Valley this morning. Coach, I got to ask you a quick question about that because a few weeks ago we had a guest in studio with us who was joining us from one of the local law enforcement agencies. And just as a sidebar, the subject came up about parents who behave badly at sporting events. And you wouldn't believe the number of calls we got from people and who've seen it, witnessed it. And I'm hearing a lot of people saying that a lot of referees are just simply throwing in the towel and walking away from high school sports because things have gotten to be so bitter among some parents. You mentioned that you pass out these lifesavers, and what's the best way to deal with that?
Well, the reason I started doing it is because exactly what you described there. You have these parents that don't understand what we're trying to do in the court. They see the surface. We see the whole court. And we're trying to make split-second decisions, and their life is all centered around that split-second decision. And I think what is lost in that whole process is that life is full of these aha moments, for lack of a better term. And so what I try to do as a referee is make them aware of what is really going on, because they only see a little perspective. And here's a good analogy. There's 86,400 seconds in a day. Take that to a dollar amount and say, okay, there's $86,400. Somebody steals 10. Are you going to spend the $86,390 trying to find a 10? Or are you just going to say, let's use this as a life lesson? And so what I've had to do is I've had to come up with some creative ways to reduce some of this stress. And so in Scripture it says your life is a letter that impacts hearts. And we're called to save lives. And so I thought, I'm going to grab some lifesavers and just put them in my pocket as an experiment. And so I bought a bag of lifesavers, and I handed it to a parent that's pretty into the game in an appropriate way, but is sitting next to an inappropriate parent. And I tell that parent, we're here to save lives and help children make wise choices. And I hand them a lifesaver to get the point across that this is a process of developing life skills, because 1% of those kids will play that sport in a professional manner, but 100% have to live life. What am I as a referee doing to mold that life? Remember, person first, player second.
I think back to my own days, and I go back all the way to Pop Warner football, and then through high school, and I remember coaches, maybe because they're not called teachers, they're called coaches, but they do the same thing. And I don't know that I really gave much thought to the influence they were having on my life, because all you could think about was, I'm sore, we're doing 2-a-day workouts, I'm sweating, and this guy's making me run faster and making me continue to run. But, within 25 to 30 years after I was actually out of school and looking back on it, I can literally some days be sitting somewhere and remember being on that field and remember exactly what that coach was telling me that particular day. And oftentimes these were life lessons. One of them, especially, I still stay in touch with some of my coaches because of social media today. But he used to tell us constantly, he would say, you've got to learn that you're going to play with pain. And you know, that has a lot to do with what's going on the field. You're going to have bruises and other things that happen, and you're going to have to continue to go out and play. But it also is quite applicable to everyday life because you have emotional pains and you have slights and hurts in the workplace and any number of things come along like that. And the fact that I can still remember that today, it must have. I didn't realize how profound it was at the time, but it apparently stuck with me. And these are the types of things that people who are in these roles need to keep in mind: is that they are having this tremendous impact on young people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more because I use the terminology obstacle versus opportunity. And there's a statement made by Paulo Coelho. It says, the world is changed by our examples, not by your opinions. And in that process of my life and the coaches I've had in my life, the teachers I've had in my life, they made me aware of that there's some obstacles that are going to come my way. But the most important thing it taught me is take those obstacles as opportunities to grow. Going back to young people and their stresses in life. One of the best things my dad did in my life, he gave me a lot of no's. And for those no's in my life, I use that as an acronym, as a new opportunity or a new option. When I hear that no, I'm realizing, say, okay, Pete, pause. Take a second. What is really going on? You know, I think what happens a lot of times in life is we get so entrenched in the stresses of life that sometimes we need to stop or we need to halt. And by halt, I mean ask yourself these 5 questions. Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I anxious? Am I lonely? Or am I tired? If I answer yes to any one of those questions, halt or stop and think about what is going on in my life and then regrouping myself in an appropriate manner so that I can make the right decision. And when we talk about the stressors in young people's life, we're trying to move so fast that the kids can't grow up. We're trying to make them grow up faster than they need to be. And we need people in their lives. It's like, look at the alphabet. Every letter has a value. And if you look at the perspective, in high school, we're pushed for academics. And you add those points up for A, C, whatever, and you get a total of 58 points or 58%. You take hard work, and I think it comes up to about 92. You take knowledge, it's about 96. But you take attitude, it adds up to 100. So what that tells me in life is what is your attitude through whatever situation you go through? How are you looking at life? Are you looking at life in a manner to blame or make excuses? Or are you looking at it in a manner to empower yourself to become a better person despite that obstacle in your life? And take that obstacle as an opportunity to grow. Life isn't fair. We're a crash helmet. Or what I'm saying by that is life isn't fair. Put on your thinking cap so that you can empower yourself and empower other people through that process.
I can recall this very same coach, and we had a really spectacular season. We lost one game, but some of the wins we had, I remember him not being happy with us because he thought we'd played sloppily at times. But the game that we lost was to a real powerhouse in our conference, and we lost in the last couple of minutes on a long pass. Somebody broke after a defensive back fell, and we lost this game, and it was heartbreaking. And it was a silent bus ride home, and as I was getting off the bus, he was standing there, and as he saw how dejected I was, he gave me a hug and patted me on the back and never said a word. But that made all the difference in the world to me that particular day because he was able to have some empathy with his players at that moment.
Well, I think one of the things I've done all levels of refereeing kids, and kids are so dejected when they lose. And what I try when a parent comes up to me, and I try to tell them, young people or parents, you never lose. You either win or learn, which is a win-win. And I think just the example you said where the coach patted you in the back. You can learn from winning. You can learn from losing. But in that process, you're learning perseverance. I think one of the biggest challenges is we always talk about perfection. We want this perfect season. We want to be undefeated. I would challenge you, I would rather use the term excellence, because perfection is trying to reach outside your skill sets. Perfection is doing the best within your skill sets. And I think sometimes that gets lost in this journey of education through academics or through sports, that we want this perfect. I want a 4.0. Really? In life, there's going to be failures. And we learn from those failures. I use the analogy. When I fail, I'm failing forward, fixing my attitude and actions intentionally so that I can learn. And I think that's where a lot of the stressors come, is because we try to measure ourselves against other people. But I think I sent you this quote. It says, God gave you your unique fingerprint so that you can have a unique impact on life.
You did.
Because there's only one you. And that's how God designed it. So the idea is, don't try to match up to Joe. Be the best Pete that you can be.
Hold on to that thought. We've got to take a short break. We've got more coming up with Coach Pete Coulson in just a few minutes. In the meantime, though, the Rush Morning Update, we're at 41 on News Radio 1310 KLIX at newsradio1310.com. It's 7:45 on Magic Valley This Morning with Bill Cully. And I got to mention quickly on the weather that we're looking at the possibility of rain pretty much throughout the day today. There may be a few breaks. Lighter rain tomorrow, lighter rain Friday, and then a return perhaps over the holiday weekend to a lot of rain. But temperatures will be warming up during the course of that weekend. We're speaking this morning. Our guest is Pete Coulson, and he has been a coach and referee for decades in the states of Oregon and Idaho, and offering us some thoughts on life today and young people as well. And I just want to note, I have a friend of mine who's been listening online this morning, and he says, I officiated high school, junior college, D3 and D1. That's non-league basketball for 20 years. And he said, by far, the hardest games to do is the younger age group with the parent involvement. And I probably would think that most referees would second that. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. We're at 40, and it's coming up on 7:50. And, Coach, he brings up a good point, because I think the parents of the younger kids really want to be involved in every aspect of that child's development.
I think one of the unfortunate aspects of that is that a lot of parents live their athletic career through their kids. And that's dangerous. Because I find a lot of kids, they really don't want to be there. But their parents are pushing them to be there, because maybe through that way, that parent may be receiving some success, or they've got this idea that this kid's going to be some professional player down the road, and he's going to help them survive the financial responsibilities of life. So it becomes a very interesting dynamic.
We were talking just before the break, and I don't know that you got a chance to finish what you were talking about.
I think we were just talking about choices in life.
Right.
And how we process through. And I think one of the things you mentioned to me is, how do we live life in this chaotic society?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we tend to look back and say, okay, in 1800, this is how it was done. In the 1900s, this is how it was done. And I wish I could go back there. Well, the reality of this is that God called us to live for today. So do what you can to impact what life brings you today. Don't lose hope. My hope is in God. He is my sufficiency. And I try in my best is that it's called lifestyle evangelism. Preach often and when necessary use words. And one of the greatest things is I think I use the term hopes when I talk about my parents, and they helped us fulfill our hopes. And by hopes, what I mean is helping orphans persevere in every situation. And that's when I work with young people. That's what I'm trying to do is teach them perseverance, teach them resiliency when life is tough, how to fight through those obstacles of life, have that fortitude to go forward. And that's so fundamentally important. It's your attitude of the heart. In Scripture says, Romans says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, to present your bodies as living sacrifices. The message says you will be changed from the inside out. It's a hard attitude. It also is just, I'm reminded the fact that God requires us to prepare our minds for action. One of the things that young people, even with myself sometimes and in adults, we always want to be right. If you're always right, you never learn. Allow yourself to be wrong. Allow yourself to lose so you can learn. And that's so fundamentally important.
We were talking during the break a little bit about today's world, especially, I guess, in what we call Western culture, where the sense of optimism. You know, when I was a boy growing up, we were in the space race and we knew we were going to go to the moon, and then the country went to the moon, and you know, you just had this view that there was a can-do attitude, a can-do spirit, and now it seems that culturally, even though we have more than we've ever had before when it comes to material possessions and the like, but we all stand back and say, well, it's all spinning out of control. From your perspective, do we need an attitude adjustment there?
The attitude starts with you, with me. I can look at Washington, I can look at the state of Idaho and all its legislative mandates, but what am I doing as an individual to make a difference? Because it's one step at a time. I look at it as more positive because I know God is in control. That's my strong belief system. I'm not embarrassed by that because I know He's in control. So everybody doesn't have that belief system. And one of the most valuable lessons my parents taught me, life isn't about what race you are. Life is about building relationships that connect. And by connecting is allowing yourself to be vulnerable so that you're authentic, so that we can learn from each other. I can learn from the liberals. I can learn from the Democrats. I can learn from the Republicans. I can learn from everybody. Because through the life lessons of life I've learned, I need to build relationships. Is when somebody says, well, what color is your blood? Well, it's kind of a stupid question, but it was a very embarrassing question and kind of a frustrating question for me to answer. But what I have to do is I have to build a relationship with that person. Why do you ask me such a stupid question? I'm a part of the human race. My blood's the same as yours, or other insensitive comments made. What am I doing to build relationships so I can understand you and you can understand me?
Do you look at the current situation and think that this will pass and that we'll return to some sense of optimism anytime soon?
I think if we model that, that can change. It's right back to that thing I said earlier. The world is changed by examples, not by your opinions. Be a person that doesn't give up hope in young people. Yes, some of our young people is out of control. Yes, some of our adults are out of control. But what can we do to empower that so we can go back to, yes, there is a new tomorrow. New day with new opportunities for positive impact. Take those battles of life. Don't break bridges, build bridges. Don't become bitter, become better.
I just got we've got a couple of minutes to go, but knowing your life history and having read your biography and talked to you a little bit about your past. You didn't dwell on, you didn't end up feeling sorry for yourself a lot, apparently, during life.
No. Why? What do you gain by that? And I think my parents emphasized in us character development. It's not the color, it's not the culture, it's the character that's going to define me. And I had people in my life when I didn't understand mom and dad that embraced that hope, that embraced that opportunity. That through these obstacles that you face, there's opportunity to build yourself to become the best that you can be, because once you become the good person, the right profession will follow.
I want to thank you for your time today, Coach. We can hopefully talk again sometime soon. And the next time you're back in the neighborhood, you might want to pop in and join us in the studio, and we can maybe take some telephone calls from the listening audience too, and you can maybe even talk a few people down from the cliff.
Yes,
Be a wonderful thing.
Well, in a quick close, when I was going to college, I had a lot of people be presidents. And one summer, I got a call from the hospital. And the hospital asked me to talk to these young men. I didn't know what was going on, but come to find out, this man was ready to take his life. And he called me to talk to him. And my message is, don't be so busy in the challenge of life that you don't have courage to help others.
Amen. Well, I thank you again for your time, and I wish you I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk again soon.
God bless you, my friend.
You too, sir.
Day.
Thank you. The Coach Pete Coulson joining us this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. And I do want to point out, too, as well, Pastors Roundtable is on the way this morning, and if pastors may have actually been listening to some of that, they may have some thoughts, too, in relation to some of his comments. In the meantime, the news is on the way in just a moment. It's 7:59 on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com with Bill Colley.